Hello there, Bills Mafia and football fans, and a happy Tuesday evening to each and every one of you. Thank you so much for being here on this week's episode of Under Review. That red light is on, which means we are officially live, and it is the off season. But in the wake of the offseason, there was a lot of discussion, a lot of previewing, and a lot of projection that goes into every position group going into the season. Last year, or last offseason at least, this show did their final position preview on quarterback. But I wanted to start out with that. I wanted to get the ball rolling and talk about Josh Allen, how he performed in 2023, and how we think he'll perform this upcoming year. And there's only one person I could get to join me for this conversation. If you recall, he was here the last time, but he's back. My favorite blue ethereal floating orb of light, Mr. Bruce Nolan. The two of us are going to be discussing Josh Allen's performance, what we're going to expect out of him, and how some of the changes in Joe Brady's offense could affect him and also maybe help him thrive. But I appreciate each and every one of you. My name is Joe DeRosa. You can find me on Twitter at show_DeRosa. Tonight's headline is Joke Arena of Time because we're going into the past and the present in this discussion. But without further ado, let's go.
Previous play will go under review.
Once again, everybody, thank you all so much for being here on this week's episode of Under Review. If you could be as kind as to drop a like on this video, it will always be appreciated by myself and all the friends at the network. But not just friends of the network, we have a friend of the network joining tonight. One of my favorite guests on the show, someone who is always great to have any sort of discussion with, Mr. Bruce exclusive himself, Bruce Nolan. How you doing tonight, my man?
Joe, it is a party all the time. Disco balls, dancers. I do have a bone to pick, though. You mentioned in the intro that there was only one person you could get to have this conversation with. Not only one person you wanted to have the conversation with, one person you could get. So I was the only one who would show up, and that's just the way it is. You're lucky you redeemed yourself with the Joke Arena of Time joke, because otherwise I'd be like, you know what? Screw this. I'm out. Right?
Man.
I'm the only one who show up, I guess.
Oh, man. I meant like the one and only, the person that I trusted the most to have this conversation with. I do apologize. Sometimes I say things, they don't come out the right way, and then it ends up having to be redeemed by a niche Legend of Zelda reference. But Bruce, I truly appreciate your time as always. You are just one of my favorite guests to talk to. And tonight's episode, again, I wanted to start with quarterback because I felt like last year I saved it for the end and I was getting way too antsy when it came to position previews. I wanted to go into the Josh Allen discussion as we're going through OTAs, as we're in the midst of the turnover with Joe Brady. So starting this show off, I just want to ask you first and foremost, how did you feel about Josh Allen this past season? Because when we talked about it on our show, we had our projections, we had our predictions and everything. But given that and also just what you watched, what you saw on film, how do you feel about him in 2023-24?
I feel like 2023 was another really good year for Josh Allen. I think that one of the things that you could absolutely make an argue is it was MVP caliber season for him. In 2020, which I believe was probably Josh Allen's best season, I stand by the fact that the only reason he didn't win the MVP is because Aaron Rodgers went nuclear.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. If Aaron Rodgers doesn't go completely off his rocker in 2020, I think Josh Allen wins the MVP. And so how good you are relative to someone else, or how your statistics line up next to someone else, or what your strength of schedule was next to someone else, these are the things that will help you determine whether or not you're going to win MVP. But in a vacuum, you can still have multiple quarterbacks who have an MVP caliber season. Like, that's still possible, because whenever you're measuring something, there's always multiple methods of measurement. The first one is in a vacuum. The second is relative to something else. So on one hand, I don't think he had as good of a season in 2020 as Aaron Rodgers. I don't think he had as good of a season in 2023 as he had in 2020. But just in a vacuum, just as a, was it good? Just vacuum. That's it. it was absolutely an MVP caliber season for Josh Allen. I think it started on a particularly low note when you open against the Jets and you had arguably his worst game of the season, worst game we've seen him play in a while, to be honest. And the big discussion coming out of that first game by many, including myself, was the necessity of being able to play within the offense. And occasionally we saw little sprinkles of that Josh Allen start to come up. And then at the end of the season, he was playing a lot more within the offense. Under Joe Brady, he played a lot more under control. He played a lot more within the offense. And I think that's going to be one of the keys moving forward, but we're going to get into that later. That's my overall thought on Josh Allen 2023 and how he performed.
And I fully agree with that take. I think it was MVP caliber. We can get into the semantics and the argument of Lamar Jackson versus Josh Allen versus Dak Prescott. But the reality is, in a vacuum, when you look at his stats as an objectively good quarterback year, it was one of his best seasons. And then when you look at it compared to his peers, it was also one of the best quarterback seasons in the NFL this past year, coming number 2 in total EPA per play, only behind Brock Purdy, another MVP candidate. And I was pleased with a lot of the year, but I do like that you brought up that Jets game, because that Jets game and some other games in the season is kind of a culmination of my frustrations with Josh Allen, where it feels like he is someone with an immensely high ceiling that he's always chasing after, and you're always seeing the results, but the mistakes are very preventable ones where you look back and you say, why? What are you doing? Why are we even seeing this in week 1? And I forgave it because week 2, week 3, week 4 were nuclear Josh Allen performances. It was where you were seeing him at his best. And I also love that you brought up the second half and really the end of the season where he's playing within structure, because I think when we talk about going forward and talking about him with Joe Brady and what you could expect from a full Joe Brady offense, that is imperative, because there's going to be a lot of changes, a lot of different dynamics to how Joe Brady plans to call this offense, where you are hoping that Josh Allen can play within structure because he trusts the structure. I was very pleased with this 23-24. I love saying both years. I never just say 2023. I don't know why, but like, the advanced metrics favored him again. So many positive things, even though it was 29 passing touchdowns, that was still 5th most in the league. And obviously the number declines because his red zone production as a rusher goes up and he has more touchdowns there. It was a lot of fun to watch him. It was a lot of fun to see situations where he put the team a bit on his back. And it was fun to see kind of him overcome a lot of the adversity that happened within the year post Ken Dorsey, seeing the kind of, I don't want to call it a meltdown, but hard kind of adjustment they had to make, seeing him kind of come out of that unscathed and then go into the playoffs and play like the Josh we know who performs well in the playoffs. It was fun, and I was pleased to see it. And I'm glad that we could have some good vibes to start the show off when we talk about him. But let's move on to really this upcoming year. 23-24 is going to be a new offensive identity for the Buffalo Bills. I've talked about it a few times on the show with Anthony a couple weeks ago and briefly with Uber at times. And really a new look that I think, while it's not going to make this offense less Josh Allen centric, because he is a top 3 quarterback in the NFL, someone that you want to rely on, it will feel a bit different. It might see a little bit different to a lot of fans, to a lot of people who've covered this team for years. So Bruce, I want to ask you, just what in your eyes for Josh Allen might have to change in a Joe Brady offense, or really what do you think you might see from Josh Allen that you haven't seen before, or something that might come back if he hasn't done it in a while in your eyes?
For me, I think the thing that Josh Allen needs to make sure that he's doing more of in 2024 than he did in 2023 is, shockingly enough, playing within the offense. But I want to elaborate on that point a little bit. When you have a singular elite talent like Stefon Diggs, you can get away sometimes with not playing within the structure of the offense because you have the high-end talent to be able to bail you out. I made an argument when I was doing an opinion piece for Buffalo Rumblings that I wrote, and I said, this wide receiver group is not as good as last year. I don't think it's a hot take by any means, but I do think it's probably deeper. I think your 5th receiver and your 4th receiver are probably better in 2024 than they were in 2023. And so because of that, your ability to be able to play within the offense is actually more important, because that having that high-end top-level talent can allow you to play outside structure and rely on the high-end talent to occasionally go get you a bucket. Occasionally just ISO it up. It's a little bit like basketball. So I'm going to make a basketball analogy here. when you have a really, really, really good player or two really, really, really good players, and you can just line up an ISO and let them win, that's awesome. Your ability to be able to function with the offense and have the ball movement necessary to be able to score is less important because you can just say, go get a bucket. If, however, you have a deeper, but not necessarily the same amount of high-end talent team, you can't do those same things anymore. Now you need to play within the offense. Now you need to make sure that you're finding the open man, because the open man could be your fourth or fifth option at that point, and your fourth or fifth option in 2024 could be better than your fourth and fifth option in 2023, which means they have a higher likelihood of being able to score a bucket in this case, and your number one receiver might have a less higher probability of being able to get you a bucket. So as you spread out that talent, you become breadth of talent, and it becomes a kind of a wider perspective on offense. And so when I think about it, I think that's the type of offense you need to play within. Kyle Shanahan made a comment about Josh Allen after he got absolutely lit up on Sunday Night Football a couple years ago. And he said, there's just a couple plays a game, 4 or 5 plays a game, where you just go, those are the plays that separate winning from losing. And people like that can go get those plays. One of the reasons why I held firm to the 49ers are going to draft Trey Lance thing all the way through is because I remember what he said, and they wanted to go get a player like that. Now, of course, they ended up with Brock Purdy, which is hilarious when you think about it. But the truth is that those 4 or 5 plays are still going to need to be made when it comes to Josh Allen. You're still going to have Josh Allen plays where he just does a ridiculous thing that 2 people on the planet can do, and that's just the way it is. You just go, well, you got Josh Allen. You look at your defensive coordinator, if you're the opposing head coach, and you go, I mean, you called the right play. They threw paper, you threw rock, and then they threw Josh Allen. So sorry for your luck. Like, it's like rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock, right? From Big Bang Theory, right? And so for me, playing within the offense becomes more important when you have a deeper but less high-end talented receiver group, specifically passing the ball. So that's my thing. That's why I think it's more important. I don't think you can have games like the New York Jets game and have even as high of a chance of being able to be successful offensively because you don't have that high-end talent. You need to play within the offense. 4 or 5 plays a game, Josh Allen being crazy is fine. But aside from that, he needs to do what he needs to do inside the offense to make it work.
I was going to tweet something today, and then I got sidetracked with work, so I couldn't make the point then. But I'm honestly glad because I would save it for now. To further what you said, because I thought that was beautifully put, and I agree. I think what they've constructed for this how they've constructed this room and what they've built for Josh Allen is an opportunity, a very positive potential, at least in my eyes, where I could see Josh Allen maturing in a way that we've never seen him mature before. Now, I want to stress Josh Allen is about to be in his 7th year in the league. He's obviously had many seasons of work under his belt. We've seen what he's been able to do at his absolute peak. But one thing that frustrates me, kind of what I alluded to before with Allen, is inconsistency. I think Allen is a top 3 quarterback in the league, but I do think that Josh Allen is his own worst enemy at times where there is an overzealous nature of his game, a kind of innate ability to go hard when you don't have to go hard, and in turn, maybe putting yourself in a zone where you're making mistakes because you press too much when you don't want to press. Sugar high Josh is a real thing. I think the way that they've built this offense up for Josh Allen is an opportunity to have Josh Allen kind of beat his own mindset, beat his own mentality of hyper aggression. Because if the structure of this offense is cohesive, even if it doesn't involve a Stefon Diggs, even if it's not involving trading for a Justin Jefferson or something crazy like that, but rather something that's just solid in principle that he can see is productive, despite the fact that he's not the only one making these astronomically wild, low probability throws or plays all the time, then I think there is a lot of opportunity for Josh to truly become that elite presence, not saying he isn't already, but rather someone that mentally has just progressed so much in their game where it doesn't matter if there isn't a Stefon Diggs on the field or any one of these elite guys, because he's performing well enough within the structure of the offense to trust what's around him, to go from being someone who's had an alpha, kind of your best buddy, someone that I'm going to get the ball to you, just run and catch it too. All right, that's gone. Even though I love Dalton Kincaid, even though I think Keon Coleman has potential, even though there's a lot of guys in here that I don't hate and think could be very good, not saying you're implying that at all, but more just like it's obviously not a Stefon Diggs offense. He can now, in turn, just try to build trust in the body, the cast of characters he has, progress beyond the fact that he wants to feed the ball if things are not working to one guy, play within structure. And then if the structure that he is able to elevate because he's just a talented quarterback is actually successful, then you're going to earn those opportunities for Josh to actually be explosive if you need to be, because not every play works. And even the best offenses could get shut down. But imagine Josh being able to trust the structure he's playing within. Then, in turn, even in the plays where it's well matched with defense, you get that extra step from Allen. That's what I'm really excited for. And that's what I'm hoping he changes. Like you alluded to, Bruce, just playing within structure, but being able to remain composed, being able to understand that you don't have Diggs, you don't have that guy anymore. You're going to have talent, but it's not going to be the same exact thing. And I don't think Joe Brady, Brandon Beane, Sean McDermott wanted it to be the same thing, because the same thing that you ran for the past few years was starting to kind of get solved and starting to kind of get figured out, where if they don't feed it through Diggs, what else do they have? And I was a supporter of Gabe. I'm a supporter of Dawson Knox. But I think if you're taking away that identity and rather changing it to something where it's just a sucker punch at every level, even if it's not a wide receiver one major alpha super talent at every position, it could still be successful. And Josh Allen, in turn, could take a mental leap that I think he still could take, where he becomes someone that just truly is indefensible beyond just being that aggressive, explosive play caller, but someone who's more cerebral and surgical behind the line. Bruce, did that point makes sense? Because I feel like I'm running off 3 hours of sleep, so I apologize if my words are jumbling, but do you have anything to add to that, or anything you disagree, agree with?
No, it's the difference between Josh Allen being a playmaker and Josh Allen facilitating plays. Those are not the same thing. And if Josh Allen feels, if he has the lack of Diggs and he feels now like he has to go make a play on every single play, we're gonna get really inconsistent Josh Allen. That's what we're gonna get. And I don't think that's a method that we want to go down. So for me, I think it's the difference between Josh Allen going, I need to make a playmaker on every, you know what? I think I should start referring to it as passive voice Josh Allen. And I'll tell you what I mean. It's the difference between I need to make a play or a play needs to be made. Those are very different concepts. The first one is I need to make a play, right? I need to make a play. Something ridiculous has to happen here, and I have to be the one to do it, right? The second thing is a play needs to be made. Well, a play could be made through the structure of the offense. You don't have to have star players to have a play be made at every position. It can be a function of the offense and you doing your job the way you're supposed to do your job. Now, 4 or 5 times a game, you're going to have to do something ridiculous because you're going to throw rock and they're going to throw paper. It's just the way it is. And you need to play above the X's and O's. And we want that. But if you're trying to play above the X's and O's 40 times a game, bad things are going to happen. You're going to end up netting playing beneath the X's and O's. That's what's going to happen. But those 4 or 5 times a game that you got to do it, you got to do it. So for me, I don't necessarily want to see low positive Josh Allen. I want to see passive voice Josh Allen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a version of Josh Allen that just remains composed, kind of knowing the time and place, which is like, I think a point of discussion that's been made over the past few years about his play. Now, I want to make it clear too, because I see this comment from Sophia, who I appreciate watching the show. She's here very often. I think this inconsistent Josh talk is being way overplayed in this discussion. I want to stress my outlook of Josh Allen is not that this is all he does. It's rather just points of a season over the past few years where I think that he can really just do better. And I don't mean that in a simplistic way, like, oh man, he stinks, he's not playing, but really preventable mistakes. Again, pressing, doing too much. The idea that he has to, again, put on the Superman cape every single play because he doesn't feel that there's another option. When I believe that a composed Josh Allen is the best version of Josh Allen. And I like to point to certain games like, again, the Miami game this year, where Josh Allen was trusting what he saw, not pressing. If there was a check down, he was taking it. If he had the throw, he had it. It was never a feeling of like he was ever going to make a boneheaded mistake because he was locked in. And you could just tell from the delivery, from the pocket presence, from the picking and choosing of when to run rather than the frantic scrambling. I think that there's a version of Josh Allen that we truly haven't seen that can do this at a more consistent level versus times where it's there and times where it's not there, and times where if it was there, you would have seen some really different outcomes to preventable losses. And again, it's not to say that defenses won't figure it out, because defenses always do. That's the NFL. It's cat and mouse, and there's always going to be one side that gets over on you in the course of a game. But rather that I just feel Josh Allen presses a bit too much for my liking at times, and it could be corrected. And I'm hoping that that can happen in Joe Brady's offense this upcoming season. And I think that's a good segue for the next topic of discussion, Bruce, which is the inverse of this, talking about Joe Brady, what Joe Brady can do for Josh Allen in this offense, and what you could see him try to set up to help Allen this year in the turn of a new offense. So I want to hear your thoughts on really Brady as an OC in your eyes, because I don't think we've really discussed this much, and also what he could really do for Josh Allen to get the best version of him.
I think the best thing you can do to help Josh Allen when it comes to this kind of thing is create binaries for him when it comes to the pass game. I think having a better run game is good. I think it's nice. I think keep the game in reasonable stuff that Josh Allen doesn't feel like he needs to all of a sudden put the cape on 40 times a game, which is great. But ultimately in the pass game, I think it comes down to binaries. And I'm not saying it's just RPOs, but RPOs are help, right? High lows, things like that. I think that when you make the game a pure drop back a game 40 times a game with full field reads, I think what you're doing is you do that if you have elite players. And I don't think you do. I don't think you do have elite players in the pass game. And if you want evidence of this, look no farther than the Buffalo Bills' nemesis, the Kansas City Chiefs, who do not have a traditional drop back 40 times a game, straight drop back, no play action, no RPO, full field read. That's not their thing. Now, I'm not saying that Patrick Mahomes is being babied, because he's not. He can still do ridiculous things, but he only does those ridiculous things, you guessed it, 4, 5, 6 times a game.
Mm-hmm.
It's not 40 times him running back there and being insane. You need to be able to draw up things that allow Josh Allen to go, okay, even if I don't make a ridiculous play, good things can still happen on this play if I just follow the nice, easy binary, high, low, run, pass, whatever it is. And if you can call enough of those, and please, for the love of all that is holy and sacred, Joe Brady, please, more play action. I beg of you, more play action. What are the things that Josh Allen statistically does best? He plays off play action really, really well. Mm-hmm. So can we not run it like 18% of the time this year? That would be great if we could just not do that. Let's just do the things. This is going to sound extremely elementary, but ultimately football can be simple. Let's just do the things he's good at more often and do the things he's not as good at less often. It's just mind-boggling to me. So let's create things where when you run, not max protect, but when you run play action, you have a tendency to keep more, is a correlation between keeping more people into block and running play action. On average, you have more blockers on play action passes than you do on non-play action passes. That's just a correlation. So that means there's fewer people out in the routes. If there's fewer people out in the routes, it means it's, again, more binary, tertiary sort of reads. 1, 2, 3. Okay, now go be ridiculous. Go do the ridiculous thing that you do. But the problem is, if you have 5 out in the route at all times, drop back pass, pure drop back game, no play action, now all of a sudden you're asking him to get through 4, 5 reads plus a check down, not plus a check down, 4 or 5, including the check down. And then all of a sudden now he's got to go make a ridiculous play. But by that time, nobody's got time for 5 reads and then running around. So for me, that's the thing. I think you need to, I don't want to say simplify the offense because it makes it sound bad, but what you need to do is you need to create binaries and tertiaries for your quarterback, and you need to lean into the things that he does well. And I specifically was harping on Brady a lot last year for not running enough play action, and I'm going to continue to bound that.
Which is fair. I do wonder, and I'll ask you this question before I make my point, but how much do you feel that is the fact that he inherited a playbook that I don't want to say didn't have it, but really was you're limited to how many of those concepts exist? Or do you have a different perception of it where maybe it's just an unwillingness to do it because they haven't been doing it during the season? What's your take on that?
When it comes to play action, I know they had enough plays to be able to do it at a higher pace than they did, even if you end up repeating some things. So I don't think you go into the game plan with, 9 play action pass calls. And then you just say, well, that's not enough of them. I mean, you're going to run, 35 or 45 pass plays a game a lot of times. You can run it more than 15, 20% of the time. Even if you have to duplicate plays, you can still do that, especially if you have, run games that look like that. And so I understand the limitations that come with dealing with someone else's playbook. I have a tendency to believe that those limitations are more around play design and not so much that you just didn't have access. It's not like he took over Tecmo Super Bowl and he realized that they didn't have a play action pass. Like, well, I'm sorry, I don't know what to do. I took over this game halfway through for my little brother because he was struggling and wanted to win, and they just don't have a play action pass. So I'm just, I want to see more.
Perfectly fair. I agree with that. And what I'll say is a common complaint that a lot of fans had, a lot of people who watched the Bills offense more in depth had about Ken Dorsey felt like, and this is kind of what this comment's alluding to from Johnny Mack, but less choice routes. Really the layering of, or I should say the continued margin of difficulty or margin for error with every step in the play calling when Ken Dorsey was there. Not all the time. Again, plenty of times where it actually worked and the play calls were solid and Josh was locked in and you saw success. But also times like the Bengals game where maybe that layering of Josh calls play has choice route, Josh has to read route, also read choice route, make sure that they're on the same page, trust it, make sure the defense looks good for it. That layering, those buffers create more difficulty for the quarterback. And where I want to see Joe Brady continue, because I felt like this was better in the second half of the year, was more intent, kind of like what you were alluding to, about really not overcomplicating it all the time and being more, I guess, impactful or more direct about the plays you're calling based on the defensive coverage you're seeing. And what I liked about Joe Brady in the second half of the year was that what I felt was, even though it wasn't anything revolutionary with the offense, it wasn't anything brand new. These are concepts that had already existed and already been run. It felt like the timing and the intent of it in the game plan or whenever they wanted to trot it out was a lot better in my eyes. And I feel like at the same time too, it also helped Josh Allen in spots because when you feel like you have a coordinator that's able to do this a little bit more consistently and get you in a groove and help your offense, even if it's not you, but maybe your running game, then I feel like that's going to up the confidence of the whole room, especially your quarterback, and you'll get more productive as a whole. And I wanted to see that in the playoffs too, because obviously there were lulls in that 5-game winning streak, but also some really nice highs from Joe Brady, especially in that Dallas game, which I've mentioned a few times in the past couple of weeks. But when you get to that Steeler game and things stop working and you have to pivot over, or maybe Kansas City where the run is working and then they change the way they were defending it, so they put the ball in Josh's hands a bit more. I feel like Joe Brady had a good understanding of kind of the when to pivot. And I think for Josh Allen this upcoming year to be successful, and something that I think Joe Brady could help him with, is really, again, calling with intent, starting your games off by maybe running something based on what you're seeing, based on what this team traditionally has done in the past, whether that's running the hell out of the ball because you trust James Cook and you're excited about Ray Davis. Maybe that's trying to jab him with screams because of the screens, not screams, with the way that the defense is aligned. I feel like Brady can help Allen just by giving him the opportunity to kind of recognize that if it's not working, we'll get off of it and we don't have to be so game plan dependent, something that I felt like Dorsey kind of crippled himself with. And in turn, the whole offense kind of suffered a paralysis by analysis. Like, we're thinking too much and we're slowing down. Let's not think as much. Let's just get this call out there and let's try to run the right thing at the right time based on what we're seeing, which is so much easier said than done. I'm not saying Joe Brady has a crystal ball, but rather, if I see that the defense is constantly beating this, I'm not sticking to it just because it's in my game plan. I'll pull something else out of the book and in turn try to help my quarterback out. And another thing I really want to see is I don't want, and I don't think this is going to happen. In fact, I think it's very likely that the ratio of running to passing in this offense this year could be something like a 60-40 ratio. But I don't want there to be any sort of negative, how do I put this? Some negative vibes. I hate using that word, but negative vibes surrounding this team running the ball and effectively running the ball. Because what I really think you're about to see, and someone made this comment in our chat, I apologize. I got to scroll up and find it. But a lot of their personnel decisions are, in my eyes, reflective of how much intent they have with running the ball and how effective they want to be at it. They want to bully you. I know Uber made this point last week about just trying to have some more attitude, some more nastiness. I think up front, they're trying to have a better line for running. And I think that a lot of these receivers that they have are big body guys that are going to be better blockers on the perimeter, in line, however you want to line them up. And in turn, it's going to benefit this running game to make easier situations for Josh Allen. I think that if this team wants to lean on the run, they should, because I think Josh Allen on a 3rd and 3 is virtually indefensible. I think there's plenty of talent in the intermediate parts of the field or short parts of the field to wreak havoc on defenses, no matter what you're throwing at them. And then in turn, more confidence for Allen, which is really the thing I keep going back to on this, because I just feel that Josh Allen is a quarterback that really, just when you can keep things level for him, he just gets in such a groove that's so hard to defend, if anything, pretty much impossible. And I think Brady has a great opportunity with some of the personnel changes they've made in this offense to do that for Josh. So, Bruce, I've been rambling. Do you have any more points or anything you'd like to add to this topic before we go on?
The thing that I wanted to put a cap on with this, when it comes to the choice routes that you saw from Dorsey, is that one of the things that we didn't talk about a lot is that we got lost in the productivity of Ken Dorsey's offense from an EPA per play standpoint and things like that. Stylistically, what I said on the podcast at the time was that Ken Dorsey ran the offense like he didn't have Josh Allen. And what I mean by that is that those choice routes become really, really important if you need to make sure that you beat every single coverage potentially on every single play. That's what they're there for. If it's this, you do this. If it's this, you do this. If it's this, you do this. That way, no matter what they throw at us, we're going to be okay. That's the entire point of having those choice routes. I hate to break it to you. If you throw a rock and they throw paper, you just punch them in the face because you have Josh Allen. That's the way this works. So we just have a scenario where you don't have that type of quarterback. You don't need to do that. Instead, you can just run the plays, and if it's not there, you don't have the elite level talent at the wide receiver position to make it work, but you do have Josh Allen, who does ridiculous crap all the time. And so going back to my Tecmo Super Bowl, if you remember correctly, if you called the exact same play on offense that got called on defense, all of a sudden you'd get an all-out blitz. That would be what happened. It was almost impossible to succeed, right? If you get guessed perfectly, you can still win the play. Because you have Josh Allen. So in trying to incorporate all these other option elements into your passing game so that you can be prepared for every potential contingency, all it does is slow down 90% of the game for something that's 10% likely to happen. And that's what I mean when I say that you ran the offense like you didn't have Josh Allen. You ran it like you had Jared Goff. And Jared Goff is a good quarterback, but that's the type of offense for Jared Goff, not Josh Allen. For Josh Allen, you play fast, you play hard, and if you throw paper and if you throw rock and they throw paper, just punch them in the face. You already get your fist pumped. I mean, your fist is already closed. It's right there. We call that the rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Josh Allen.
From Spock to Josh. But yeah, it was frustrating to watch. I mean, I think a lot about the Bengals game, and I know everyone thinks about that one route. I think it was Kincaid open in the middle of the field that I've mentioned this. I know it's been mentioned on so many of our network's pods too, but like that to me felt like a culmination of my frustration with Ken Dorsey. The Denver game had problems, but that also felt like a lot of miscues more than it felt like Josh Allen paralysis, which I still think was a part of it. But I think of that game. I think of the fact that you almost saw an offense like consistently play scared when they didn't have to. Now, it's not sustainable to rely on Josh Allen to be Superman every single time. And that's kind of what I was trying to get at before with my worries of some of Josh Allen's inconsistencies in the past because I felt like he had to when you don't have to. But at the same time, your offense doesn't have to play scared either. It doesn't have to be overly conservative because that break glass in case of an emergency guy that's dictating your offense, he's there, he's real, and he's bailed you out many times. You shouldn't have to think of the worst case scenario every time, but you do have that person that could just beat the defense by himself. I think there were times where I think about Josh Allen's tenure in general. I think about that game against New England in 2021. I referenced that game a lot when I just discussed Josh Allen because that's the type of play I'm talking about from what I want to see from him on a more daily basis. Again, not saying I don't already think Josh is a top quarterback, but those plays where even they get blown up and he's still able to go off script, he's still able to run and make a crossbody throw that no one else could even dare to attempt, and he does, and it works. Or maybe 4th and 1, I need a yard. It's an outside run that gets completely blown up, but I'm big. I'm going to push you off of me and get 3 yards on this play and a first down. That will still be there, and that's still present. I think for Joe Brady this season, which is really the thing that I felt like you alluded to, and I think my big gripe with Ken Dorsey is striking the balance when you desperately need Josh to make a play and kind of having that as a luxury. Maybe putting the cape when the signal isn't just a cry wolf thing and he's actually needs to save some people in the city. I think that if you could strike the balance of a productive enough offense that doesn't make Josh feel like he needs to press, while also knowing that that's there when you need it, you're going to see a very productive offense. And even despite the moves that they made in the offseason, again, I alluded to in the description, like we talked about early, parting from Stefon Diggs, moving on from Gabe Davis, and all of these other things that have transformed the identity. I really love that you mentioned earlier the raised floor, because that's what it feels like to me. And in turn, even though it's not as sexy, it's not as glamorous, and maybe the wide receiver room in a vacuum isn't as good as what you saw last year, just from a talent perspective, it almost feels like it's still going to work. It's still going to be productive. And I think Josh Allen, like I said before, has an opportunity to truly just transform the way he plays the game on a week-to-week basis because of the way this offense is constructed for him. And you're going to see productivity from an offense with a lot of question marks, and I'm truly excited about it. So any other points, Bruce, before we move on?
I got nothing.
He's got nothing, but I do still have something for you, Bruce. I have something for the whole chat, for the whole planet, an announcement from Greg Thompson and Aaron Quinn to tell you all about the One Pass Gentleman. I just have one question for you. What do you got?
Many people ask us the best way to support us here at Cover One, and that is to sign up to become a Cover One Pass member. That contribution helps give us the access to all the data and information we use to create the content that you love.
And I think most importantly, brings you into our community of insiders. It's a great community based on Slack. I know a lot of people don't want to be on social media anymore or be in on those conversations. We bring all of it to you right in our great community of educated fans. And most importantly, you get access to our content creators.
Even better than that, everybody loves merch. You get awesome t-shirts, a cool decal, and a letter from the Cover One team signed directly to you.
All for $60. That gets you the entire season, next year's free agency and draft. $60. Click the link in the description. Cover One Insider. Become one today.
Yes, friends, esteemed colleagues, watchers, enemies, anyone who is checking this show out, anyone who checks out our network frequently, you must check the link in the description below, for that is our One Pass, and that is the lifeblood of Cover One. That One Pass subscription that you potentially have already or are thinking about signing up for is what allows us to have access to all of the resources within this network, allows us to pull any sort of advanced analytics we need to reference on our shows and our articles. And honestly, if you sign up, you get the opportunity to go into the premium Slack, which is a great time with a bunch of very fun, exciting discussion all the time. The people in there are great. There's other channels that have nothing to do with the Bills too, like a video games channel, which I've been posting in frequently because I've been playing too much Helldivers for my own good. It's a ton of fun. I would highly recommend it. Check it out in the link in the description below. Bruce, how you feeling? How we doing? How we doing at that halfway, little over halfway mark of this show? Feeling good about Josh Allen going into the season? I'm checking in.
Little known fact, I am a member of the Cover One Slack. So, just so you know, I'm in there too. If you, in case, I think the plug that Greg just gave is probably as good of a plug as you can get. But in the event you needed any more plugs, I'm a member of the Cover One Slack.
You get the opportunity to firsthand invite Bruce Nolan to your birthday party. In fact, I'm going to do that in a couple months when it's my birthday. And if you don't come, Bruce, I'm going to be devastated. I'm sorry to say. But
I hope you know how to process sadness.
Of course I do. The team gets bounced from the playoffs every year. I've processed sadness for my entire tenure as a Bills fan. Sorry to say that on an episode. I was trying to make positive vibes, but let's move on to another point of discussion that I was really excited to talk to you about because it's projection season. It's the off season. We have no body of work. We're barely through OTAs. Like training camp is still months away, but I like talking about what could be when we talk about the floor and ceiling. I did this last week with Uber, but we did it really about the team as a whole and got to pretty much like kind of talk about a surface level, what could be the best case scenario, could be the worst for this. But for Josh Allen specifically, I'll first ask you this. Going into the season, statistically, if you had to give any numbers at all, or if you just feel like talking from a general range, whatever you prefer, what do you think is Josh Allen's ceiling, Josh Allen's floor with the new construction of this offense?
I don't think it's markedly different than it was last year. I mean, you might get a little bit less when it comes to total volume. Like you might be looking at 4,100 passing yards instead of 4,300 passing yards. So if I was projecting it, it'd be, 4,100 yards and, 40 total touchdowns or something like that. I don't think that would be a shocker to anybody. I think you could potentially see more efficiency if the leading indicators that we talked about before are leaned into, more play action, more RPO, more binary. I think you could get more efficient play, could get fewer turnovers, which I think would be good. But ultimately, I don't look at his ceiling markedly different than I did prior.
Yeah, that's a fair way to put it. I would agree with that for at least the part talking about his ceiling. I don't think the ceiling's much different. I think numbers wise, I could see a dip in maybe overall yardage, but maybe like a similar range of passing touchdowns. If you talk about 29 touchdowns to like all of his rushing touchdowns, I think overall yardage though would probably take a hit. And I think that doesn't necessarily reflect the offense taking a step back because again, if they do decide to lean on the run and they decide to maybe keep him out of harm's way in the end zone, more often than not saying a total removal of Josh Allen designed runs or action in the red zone to try and score, but maybe Ray Davis is really panning out. Maybe they have some really nifty plays with Curtis Samuel or one of their tight ends where they motion them across the formation, and that actually works pretty well. Maybe something with Reggie Gilliam, who for some reason gets kind of forgotten. I don't know why, because I think he could be a really fun X factor weapon for the Bills. That is something to me that I think would maybe make a hit into Josh Allen's overall production just from a number standpoint, but it wouldn't mean that the offense takes a step back. So I wouldn't mind it. I think if people are going to like refer to his numbers and try to bag on him, they might have ammo just because like the output isn't as crazy, but I really don't care as long as the offense is productive. But as far as a floor, and I do think I only asked this question to you just because I feel like it's worth talking about because in a sense, with a lot of new unproven parts of this offense going into the year, a floor does exist. And I am curious to hear what you really think the floor for Josh could be. I know you don't think it'll be marketably different, but like, what do you foresee that actually being if you had to say?
I mean, technically the floor is 0, right? Josh Allen decides tomorrow that he's going to retire from the NFL and never come back again. So technically the floor is 0, right? Haley Steinfeld says, you know what? Have you always wanted to be a kept man, Josh Allen? And sure. I'd love to, ride off into the sunset and drink wine with my Hollywood girlfriend for the rest of time. And so maybe that's the floor. But from a realistic standpoint, Josh Allen's been over the long run, the model of statistical consistency for the last couple of years. So you and I have talked about his inconsistency, and that's really in the micro. That's game by game, and it's drive by drive, and it's half by half. But the more you stretch the view out, the more normalized it becomes. If you look at Josh Allen, not play by play and not drive by drive, but year by year, it's pretty consistent. So yeah, I can say there's a floor, but assuming health of all meaningful pieces, 3,900 yards instead of 4,100 yards, 37 touchdowns instead of 40. I mean, he's been a model of statistical production. Just ask fantasy people over the last couple of years about Josh Allen's statistical significance when it comes to his consistency, and they'll tell you. So for me, the difference between floor and ceiling is just not that much.
And honestly, it's refreshing to hear that because I think that point presents to me kind of a nice alleviating part of the discussion about the uncertainty of the offense. And why I've really made an episode like this and why I wanted to do the one the past couple of weeks is because I am trying to just kind of ease some of the worry, not deny that there are concerns over like floor ceiling, some of the unknowns, but really just to kind of quell a lot of paranoia because, like you said, Josh Allen's been consistent since really 2020 when he emerged as like a top quarterback in the league. And from that point on, there's been minor differences, more turnovers in certain years than others, passing yard volume differences, passing touchdown differences. But one thing that has remained consistent is that despite, like we talked about in the micro, some inconsistencies from Josh that I would like to see cleaned up, he really does have that output every year. And there are stretches of just really dominant play from him, stretches of decline, but ultimately leading to something where the team is still quite competitive. The offense is still productive. The offense still has top 10, top 5 in certain metrics, and they end up going into the playoffs. And a lot of the time, the playoff runs coming to an end aren't really fully, I stress fully, Josh is to blame as much as there's parts, but not really the biggest portion. And I think when you look at this upcoming year and the question marks that surround this offense as far as what it'll look like, what it is going to really flow through, will it flow evenly through a bunch of people? Is there someone that's going to emerge? Will no one emerge and Josh will have to carry it? The one thing that's remained true, even though there are some major differences, like again, no Diggs, no Davis, a second year Kincaid, that might be a real big focal point of this offense, a rookie in Coleman, vets that haven't played with the team, Shakir potentially taking a leap, is that despite all these things, Josh has, in my eyes, given you a stable enough body of work where I think the floor might be, I'm not going to say wide, like a huge valley from his ceiling, rather than I think it might just be a little bit lower than years past. Like, not saying it'll be as kind of like when he was emerging in 2019, but maybe something that might be a little bit of a step back from 2021 if it doesn't work out. But I still think it's going to be good enough to elevate the team and be consistent enough where the team could still fight for a playoff spot for the division. And also, one thing I will say is, even though, again, we talked about how it's Ken Dorsey's playbook in the second half of last year and Joe Brady's just kind of calling what he's calling, Josh still played pretty damn well and still made those clutch plays. And there were times where your jaw dropped, despite even it being a game that wasn't his best, like the Patriot game at home, I think second to last week of the season. He makes some boneheaded mistakes. He throws into double coverage. He's having a rough stretch where he's like 0 for 6 with one rushing touchdown to start the game. And then he makes a wow throw to Kincaid and kind of picks it up. So while there is uncertainty, I think what I would like people to take away from the upcoming season is that there's no guarantees, but Josh has, like you said, given you a few years. Even though we might differ in how our floor looks for Allen in the upcoming season, I still think he's going to make this team incredibly competitive because he's Josh Allen. He's a top 5 quarterback in the league, top 3 in my eyes, and someone that has all the talent in the world to really, even if he does hit that floor, build off of it for future years where the team could just be absurdly competitive for as long as he remains the quarterback. So that's kind of how I feel about it. Bruce, do you have any final thoughts on that before I ask you my final question for the evening?
Nope. Let's go.
All right, man. So my final question for you. This is one that I didn't have the list because I actually thought of it today when we were like getting closer to the show start time. So I apologize for putting you on the spot, but I am going to ask you, if you had to say, looking at how they've constructed this room, who do you think Josh Allen's quote unquote right-hand man is going to be in this offense? It's more of a for fun question, but I know like a lot of people look at it as well. The offense will probably flow through Kincaid, and I think that. And people see Keon Coleman and think he's going to be Josh's new best buddy and, a 1-for-1 replacement of Diggs, which I don't think it will be. But I am curious what you think will be specifically Josh's most targeted player, someone that, even though it might be a more even distribution of the ball, would be someone he might favor a little bit more than others if you had to say one.
I know this is boring and I know this is expected, but my takes are oftentimes lukewarm. So first off, I'm not good unless I prep. So, congratulations for throwing this on at me. But thankfully you threw something at me that I was prepared for. And I'm going to go with Dalton Kincaid. Mm-hmm. So Dalton Kincaid was the second most targeted player on the team last year. And that was when you had Stefon Diggs and you had Dalton Kincaid, who didn't really take the mantle of that number 1 tight end until part of the way through the season. I think that everything that you've seen from the Buffalo Bills this offseason reeks of a team that says, well, the prospective top target guy on this offense is fine. think about the quality of players that they brought in just from a stylistic standpoint. Keon Coleman, Curtis Samuel. I mean, did they bring in players, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Mac Hollins, Chase Claypool? Do any of them even profile as being 120 target players? Even the people who are super high on Keon Coleman, do you think that's the type of ceiling that you're looking at for Keon Coleman? Do you think you're looking at the offense runs through him? He runs all the routes. He gets open against all the coverages on all the routes, and you funnel the offense through this guy, at least the passing game. Like, I don't think that even the most ardent Keon Coleman people go, that might be a stretch. Yeah. But you know who does profile as the kind of guy that you can give 100 targets to is Dalton Kincaid. So for me, it's just a matter of looking at the options, looking at the maneuvers that they made and going, yes, to your point, I think that there is going to be a more significant disparity in targets. I think that you're going to have your number 4 and your number 5 receiver get way more targets than your number 4 and your number 5 receiver got last year. And most of that's because they're better this year. The 4 and 5 spot will be manhandled by a better caliber of player. But ultimately, somebody has to get the most targets. And I think it's going to be Dalton Kincaid.
I agree. And I was just curious because I know you, and I have listened to your shows raving about Dalton Kincaid, and I am a huge fan. I don't know why, like, kind of unnecessarily harsh on him when he first started, but I do think that Dalton Kincaid is going to be the target one. But one thing I did say, I think I said this to Aaron, I said it on the show a few times. I think the top 3 in targets are going to be 3 different positions. I think it's going to be Kincaid, I think it's going to be Cook, and then it's going to be one of Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir. I'm trying to remember what I actually said to Ant a few weeks ago. I think I said it would be for reception, specifically Samuel. And I think that was really just because of my opinion of Joe Brady and how he values Samuel. But I think it's going to be Kincaid. I think he's going to be at least your primary target, not the only target, not someone that's going to have an astronomically different amount of receptions to other players on this roster. But I do think that he's going to be at least the person that when you talk about game planning and when you talk about someone that can give you that edge, whether that's trying to find soft spots in zone coverage, maybe beating a man deep, or maybe beating someone at least over the middle of the field in shorter intermediate distances, Kincaid's going to give you that. And I think the rookie season he had was so encouraging for a year 2 leap that, you know, you could be talking about one of the next great tight ends in football. And if you get that in addition to some of the young talent and other role players that you've accrued in this offense, I mean, that will just be another net positive for the Bills offense. It'll be a positive for Josh Allen. It'll help the production. It's going to just make a team in transition not have to work as hard to find out who they are. And it could be a lot of fun football to watch. And I think that when I look at the top 3, I would say it's probably going to be Kincaid. It's probably going to be Cook, and then the receiver. And I think James Cook, I'm really excited for a full season of him. I'm excited to see just the lean continue on him because, yes, I know he drops a few passes and that's a concern. And it is something that I keep in mind when I talk about him. I think that it felt like, not that they didn't get him involved at all, because that would be irresponsible of me to say. He was involved with Ken Dorsey in the Bills offense, but it felt like Joe Brady kind of unlocked the potential of James Cook more in a way we haven't seen, to the point where he's the 6th overall skill position player in yards from scrimmage, where he's one of the most productive running backs in the league currently. And I know Greg went on a whole rant about this on his show, and I loved listening to it because I think James Cook, the ceiling is still yet to be reached too. And I think that when we've talked about Joe Brady and we talked about Kincaid and all the things that could benefit Allen and keep him from pressing and making that Superman cape be something that he puts on when the time calls for it, James Cook's an integral part of that. When you talk about James Cook's ability to get involved and how Joe Brady plans to scheme him, maybe on some of those leaks wheel routes, maybe just check downs over the middle of the field to make things easier for Allen, I think that in turn with James Cook's rushing ability, in turn with how this offensive line has been in their rushing attack in this past season and what it could end up being, especially if SVPG is someone that maybe takes that starting role and you actually see some production from him again, kind of spiraling on that. But that's something that I think is also kind of an X factor piece for this offense. Like, if James Cook isn't really at his full potential and we actually see another sense of like comfort in this offense, more leaning on him, Joe Brady just really loves the weapon and wants to keep getting him involved, I think that's going to just be an astronomical benefit and something that when we talk about Josh Allen at year's end, we'll have to discuss in tandem with the quarterback because of his production. So I just wanted to give James Cook some flowers. And Bruce, just going to ask you any final thoughts on any of these topics, anything you still like to say, anything that you feel we haven't touched upon enough.
I have a question of clarification. Your
Okay.
top 3 target getters that you outlined, are those in order? Because you said Kincaid, Cook, and then either Shakir or Coleman, right? As your
I think it would be Kincaid, receiver, and then Cook.
okay.
Don't know
Because
which receiver.
I was like, I don't want to gloss over a prediction that James Cook is the second most targeted player on this team.
No.
Because if so, that needs to be like in gigantic, bold, like letters with like fire on either side. Like that needs to be like the SEO part of this podcast. James Cook will be the second most targeted
Not
receiver
second
on the
most.
Buffalo Bills or whatever it is.
No, not second most,
Okay.
but top 3. I think Cook will be 3. I think there's going to be a stern lean on him. I think they're going to get the ball to him quickly and in space. I think they're going to try and kind of galvanize any lulls in the offense with him. And I think it's worked in the past, even if it's a different kind of overall schematic, overhaul of this offense this upcoming season. Cook's going to be involved. I don't think they care about the drops. I think Josh Allen has built a rapport with him and has a lot of faith in him. I think Joe Brady unlocked what James Cook could be, even though Curtis Samuel is probably going to line up in the backfield a few times and be ran across. And I think he's going to get involved in a lot of receptions and be probably your second most, unless Shakir takes another step forward, which is an unknown and could happen. I think Cook is going to be your third most. I don't think people could disagree with it. I really do think he's going to be involved. I feel like we are getting a full season as long as he stays healthy of someone that Allen is really going to rely on all those short distance situations, but not number 2. I won't go that bold. I won't get that extreme.
Okay. So even predicting him to be number 3 is still bold. You should still lean into that. Last year, it was Stefon Diggs had 160 targets. Dalton Kincaid had 91. Gabe Davis had 81. And then James Cook had 54. So he was, 27 back from the third place.
Yeah. But that's also why I'm bringing up the fact that I felt that even though he was involved in the first half of the year, stylistically, how this offense ran through, I don't have the stat in front of me, so feel free to pull this up and disprove me because I'm always welcome to be wrong, but more involvement as a pass catcher in this offense in the second half of the year. And I'm seeing this over a full stretch of a season with Joe Brady, who, again, his style is a bit more of timing, a bit more quick, a bit more, I want to get these out. I want to help this offense by kind of making these situations a bit shorter and not getting into those. I think even if it's not an overall insane amount of yardage per his targets, it's still going to be a lot of receptions for James Cook. I could see it happening, and I'll stand on it.
I like it. So I pulled it up while you were talking so we can verify. So in order of targets, it goes from week 1 on 6, 4, 3, 1, 4, 0, 3, 1, 4, 2, 4, 7, 5, 3, 0, 3, 4.
Okay.
So maybe a little bit. I'd have to do the math, which is not good content for me to do on the fly. So, but it looks like it trended a little bit up in the back half of the season. He did have one against the Chargers where he wasn't targeted at all in the past game, but he also had a 5-target game, a 7-target game, multiple 4-target games, multiple 3-target games. And that stuff didn't happen as often the first half of the season. I think that's bold, man.
It's bold. And listen, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'm welcome being wrong. Like, you can find me, you can clip me, you can call me a dummy. It's okay. I wear it, but I really do think he's going to be involved over the full stretch of a season. I think those high target, high volume games are going to be more common. If there was a caveat to the point, I think the only thing I'll say is maybe the distribution of the ball, maybe the different concepts, maybe Ray Davis might be a part of why that wouldn't come true. But I just believe in Cook. I really do. I believe in him as a player. I believe in him in this offense. I'm excited to see what he does. And if it's third most on the team, great. If it's not, but he's still productive, then great. But I could see third. I really could. I think it would be Kincaid, receiver, Cook. I'll stand on it. And if I'm wrong,
I
I'm
like
wrong.
it. I like it.
Yeah. But Bruce, anything else? Any other points? Anything you want to say before we sign off for the evening?
No, I'm good, man. Said what I was going to say.
He said what he was going to say, and I appreciate every bit of this discourse with you, Bruce. You are, again, always welcome on the show. I appreciate our conversations. You always provide great insight. And honestly, I have so much fun talking to you because I feel like when you're on the show, and it's like one of these things is like, I feel so like buttoned up because you're just so good at this and it's so much fun to hear you talk. So I want to know what you got going on, what you're thinking right now, anything you want to say before we sign off for the evening that's not Bills related, final parting words, I guess.
Parting words from Bruce Nolan is I have been thinking a lot through my podcasting free agency over the last month or so. It'll be 2 months here next week that I've been out of the podcast game because Buffalo Rumblings, Vox Media specifically, got rid of their podcasting platform. I've been thinking a lot about being happy. And I've been thinking a lot about the number one thing that correlates with happiness from a sociological standpoint is gratitude. And I think that the more things that we believe that we are blessed by, the more grateful we will be and the happier we'll be. But oftentimes when we have a stimuli come into us, we don't view it as a blessing. We view it as something we earned or something we deserve. And so when we get that, we're incapable of being grateful for it because we can only be grateful for things that we don't think that we earned. But if everything good that comes into your life, you're like, I earned that, 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 then you're not grateful for any of it at that point. And if you're not grateful for any of it, then you're not going to be happy. So I've been thinking a lot about, because I've had unbelievable support from the community and people have been so kind, and it's really humbling. And I don't want to ever think that I deserved it, because then I'm not going to be grateful for it. And if I'm not grateful for it, then I'm going to be less likely to be happy. So that's the parting words, because it's something I've been dwelling on a lot recently, is being able to interpret the positive stimuli that come into my life as being blessings instead of being things that I deserve. Because if I view them through that lens, I'm more likely to be happy. And that's what I want for myself. And that's what I want for you guys, for all the people who are listening. So that's what I've been dwelling on a little bit. Those are my parting words.
And Bruce, I just want you to know, again, you're one of my favorite people in the space, with someone who's educated me on so many topics, someone who I followed for years and had the pleasure of hearing your content. And, despite everything that went down, if there's one thing I am so confident about, it's you finding, the one thing that I know you're going to be proud that you chose and happy with the decision. And I hope whether it's a different place to put the content out, whether it's whatever you decide to do, I am just so excited for your journey. And I really think that what you do for everyone in the space, for me, for other content creators, for the people that get to listen, is just so appreciated. And I'm sure not just me, but everyone's got your back, where we support you in whatever it is you decide to do. And again, I truly appreciate your time. You are always welcome back anytime you want to talk any sort of ball, anytime you want to talk about James Cook receptions or Legend of Zelda references. And on that note, everybody, I want to thank all of you in the chat for joining us tonight. Again, the off season's a long haul. We got a lot of months until the season begins, but stick with us. There's a lot of different shows out there churning out content on our network. Again, if you are interested in the One Pass, in the description below, feel free to check it out. I truly appreciate you all watching this every single week and, hanging in there as we wait for football to come back. I really appreciate your time, the engagement, everything. But for this Tuesday evening, I am going to bid you all adieu and say, Joe revoir, for it is time to us to say good night, because I need to eat dinner and get a nice bedtime for myself tonight, because I am really tired. So Bruce, again, thank you so much. All of you listening, whether you're live, whether it's after the fact on our platforms, thank you again. Again, before you go, if you could drop a like, rate it 5 stars, whatever you can do to support the channel, support the show, it will be truly appreciated. But everybody, have a great Tuesday. Stay happy, stay healthy, and as always, go Bills. We will see you soon. Good night.